Hello and welcome to the British Dapper, and today we're talking about my sartorial slip-ups and mistakes I regret so you don't have to, part 1. So over the years I've made numerous mistakes, and like many of us, I thought you might benefit from learning about my mistakes so that you don't have to make the same mistakes, or you can identify the same things that you've come across over the years. And so in my formative years, in my teens and early 20s, I think like most people we're hooked into fashion and the here and now. And there have been some monumental mistakes there in my era, which was in the 70s, so with flared trousers and penny rounded shirts and a number of things that literally could go wrong. And obviously I've learned from those mistakes never to wear those types of items again. As you get older, we still make mistakes, and whilst mine have not been monumental, they are things that I think if you haven't experienced them, or you are trying to bridge the gap from wearing very casual clothes into start wearing more suits or jacket-like looks, then you could find yourselves making these sort of mistakes as you go into that process. But one of the earlier things that I regret not doing is wearing a pocket square. And in my day, not many people would wear a pocket square in everyday life, and it's become more of a cultural thing, even a signal to people of your experience sartorially. So it is a flag, if you like, of your expertise or the way that you dress in a sartorial manner. And I learned about that very much later in life, and it's something that I regret I didn't do earlier. Something else that I made an error with was buying shirts with short collar lengths. Now, whilst this is a classic look, back in the day you could get them very short, and of course that dictated a certain look, but also it looked a little bit ridiculous with a full Windsor knot or a much fuller knot. So it's just something that I regret buying those shirts, because now I don't wear them anymore and I wear much more classic looking collars, and it fills that gap up a little bit better between the jacket with a much more classic or longer peak on those shirt collars. And whilst we're on the subject of shirts, something that I did in my youth, I would buy cheap shirts. Now there's two issues with cheaper shirts. They can be cheaper because of the quality of the workmanship, for example the sewing of the fabric. It could be that the quality of the fabric is a particular issue. For example, it could be polyester or a polyester cotton mix, and that obviously is reflected in the cost. Something else is the thickness of the shirt itself, and I've found over the years that to go for a slightly thicker natural fibred shirt, for example a cotton, is a much better way to go. And with a thin shirt it does wear out a lot quicker, it's more prone to staining, and also it breaks down, it tears very easily after a fashion. Also, if it's a cheaply made shirt from abroad, sometimes you'll find if you put it on a hot wash, the cotton actually shrinks, whereas the material doesn't. So you end up with this almost ruffle-like effect where the stitching is in place on a shirt, and you get lots of wrinkles caused by that. So cheaper shirts are not the best way to go. And I've found to go for a much more expensive product actually works out better in the long run. So my lesson would be to buy more expensive or more higher quality shirts in the future. Something else is those bright, bold patterns. And I remember back in the day when we would wear these multicoloured shirts, which were great with a pair of jeans or something like that. But as you get older, you find you struggle to wear them and to pair them with other items as part of an ensemble because they are quite bold. However, I'm not saying don't buy them. I'm just saying for me personally, I now steer clear of them because I find them more complex to use on a day-to-day basis without being too bold and too in your face as a pattern. Now, on the subject of jumpers, many moons ago, when I was in my 20s, Benetton's was one of the main brand names in jumpers, very in vogue at the time. And everybody was buying Benetton jumpers. And I bought two 100% merino wool jumpers. They were lovely jumpers. And I made the fatal mistake of asking my mother once when I was home on leave to wash a jumper for me, not thinking about the temperatures involved. But unfortunately, she was used to using jumpers that were acrylics and stuff, polyesters. So she decided to put them in on a hot wash. And I ended up with a jumper that was the size that you couldn't even fit a newborn baby in. And it was that thick and condensed, it was like a felt glove. Completely destroyed the jumper, which was an expensive jumper back in the day. I think it was about £60, which was quite a high price in the 70s and 80s. Needless to say, she never washed another jumper for me. And it was just because she hadn't thought about it. She didn't realise until obviously when she took it out, it was too late to do anything about it. But it was a point of hilarity and my loss of a good jumper. Something else about jumpers is that I would wear them to death. The elbows would wear out because of the constant rubbing on the elbows, and not having a rotation of jumpers doesn't help. And I feel if you wear a jumper too often, it just wears to the point where it loses its luster. And something that I've also learned is storing jumpers on hangers can be detrimental to the jumper, especially around the neck area. And over time they can stretch. They can actually not hold their shape very well. And so it's something to be aware of, and maybe use a different method of hanging them on the hanger, but primarily they should be stored flat, rolled and placed in a bag to prevent moths getting to them, because the problem with wool is moths love that as a fabric. And that brings me on to the subject about man-made fibres and jumpers. Now, over the years I have off and on bought jumpers that have been polyester acrylic mixes, some mixed with wool, and whilst they look really good and feel good at the time of purchase, it doesn't take long before those telltale signs show wear and stretch marks on the jumpers. They don't hold their shape so well, they bobble up very quickly, especially with the chunky ones, and they just do not last the test of time. So I would always advise natural wools are the ideal way to go. Sometimes you get wools that are mixed with silk or different types of wool, mohair, angora, cashmere. They are the ones to go for. Merino wool is another great material. And they're the sort of things I would suggest you go for, rather than the quick fix of something that is acrylic or polyester based, which looks initially very good and cheap. But unfortunately, it's a false economy. You're much better off buying a natural fibred material, and whilst you spend more, the longevity of that item will carry you through for many years. So on the subject of shoes, over the years I've got through a number of shoes and boots, and whilst cheap shoes and boots are okay for a quick fix, especially if you're on a very tight budget, I would say in this day and age you don't need to do that. You can actually buy high quality shoes that are 100% leather and buy them for as cheap, if not cheaper, than in-store shoes with rubber soles via eBay or Vinted. Even buy brand new shoes that have not been worn, even though they're being sold on eBay for a lot cheaper prices. But one of the things I have learned over the years is to use a shoe tree or a shoe stretcher to maintain that shape of the shoe and keep it as crease free as possible. Something else about shoes is they don't like constant wear, and I have over the years worn a pair of shoes because I like them so much that I've worn them to destruction. And so I would suggest have several pairs of shoes and in rotation. And in this day and age, I only wear one pair of shoes a day and in rotation. So every other day, I'll wear a different pair of shoes to rest up the previous pair. Something else to consider about wearing shoes, especially when they're leather soled, is the wear on the heels. And whilst it is easy to wear a pair of shoes and wear that heel down to the point where it needs to be replaced, there's a fine point where, without realising it, you could wear that heel down too far, which means more work has to be done on the shoe to repair it. And there's inherent cost to that as well, especially if you have a rubber heel or sole unit applied to a leather sole or heel. And once you wear through that rubber section, you then start working your way through the leather sole unit. So monitor the wear on your soles and heels when you're actually putting your shoes away in storage, just to keep an eye on them. And once they start looking like they're getting a little bit too low, get them in to get them resoled or reheeled sooner rather than later. It's just part of good maintenance, and it does help your shoes last a lot longer in the long run. When it comes to shoes, shoes still go in and out of fashion. So if you buy a really fashionable style of shoe, that's great. For example, there was a period where we went through square-toed shoes, and now we go for more chiseled or almond-shaped shoes. But every now and again, there'll be a certain style that comes out, or the shape of the heel that becomes more prominent. Cuban heels as an example. They come in and out of fashion quite often. But just be mindful of the shoe that you buy that's driven by fashion, because whilst it might be in vogue now, in a year, 2 years' time, those square-fronted shoes or duck-billed shoes are no longer going to be in fashion, and you end up with a pair of shoes that you probably won't be able to wear for another 20 years until they come back into fashion. I go back to my childhood and my youth where platform shoes and boots were very commonplace in the 70s, but you wouldn't dream of wearing them now. Anyway, just a few ideas there for you, and just wanted to remind you about, we have a Patreon page where we give exclusive videos on different subjects. We also give updates on what's happening behind the scenes, and depending on your level of access, you may be eligible for one-to-one question and answers sessions, and an opportunity to have a video call with myself if you have a particular issue you want to discuss, or just wanted to have a catch up with me on a personal basis. but I'll leave the link down below so you can check that out. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. We have a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, then please feel free to do so. We also love constructive comments, so if you'd like to make some, jot them down below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you've got a question you'd like to pose to us or you'd like an answer to, then why not jot it down? We'll try and answer your question for you. We also like ideas for future videos, so if you want to make a contribution and make a suggestion about future content, then please, again, jot it in the notes below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The next video could be something that you've recommended or suggested. So until next time, take care.